Trump unleashed hell against the Iranian regime after US forces disabled an empty oil tanker in the Gulf of Oman amid the naval blockade against Iranian ports. And they even rushed to save 2 American service members after an Apache helicopter crashed near the Strait of Hormuz. This Tuesday, June 9, 2026, the crisis in the Middle East reached a decisive point because Washington showed 2 things at the same time. At the table, Trump says that an agreement with Iran could become clear in a few days. At sea, the American command did not let any ship break the blockade and proceed as if there were no consequences. In the air, the Apache crash became an immediate military alert, but the crew was rescued in about 2 hours and remained in stable condition. Meanwhile, Israel continued. While hitting Hezbollah in Lebanon, Netanyahu warned that he will not accept attacks coming from Lebanese territory, and Iran is trying to hold back negotiations by demanding the release of assets. Frozen assets while avoiding directly addressing the nuclear issue. That's where Trump's pressure gains strength. He is using blockade, diplomacy, naval force, Gulf allies, and strict verification to prevent Tehran from buying time, threatening the region, and selling blackmail as negotiation. What changed in Hormuz? Why did Iran lose ground? How does Trump turn pressure into agreement? I'll explain shortly. If you like this kind of straightforward and no-nonsense content, consider subscribing because we have videos like this every day. The main event happened in the Gulf of Oman, near one of the world's most sensitive maritime routes. According to the United States Central Command, an empty oil tanker tried to break the blockade heading toward an Iranian port. The American forces disabled the vessel after the attempted passage and maintained control over maritime traffic in the region. Since the beginning of the blockade on April 13, CENTCOM reported that 134 ships were redirected, 42 humanitarian vessels were authorized to pass, and 7 vessels that did not comply were disabled. The operation was not an isolated incident. It is part of the direct pressure on the Iranian regime to open the Strait of Hormuz, reduce the threat against the United States' regional allies, and move toward negotiations with verifiable terms. Trump wants a strong document, but the message at sea shows that the document will not come from weakness. The Iranian regime knows that Hormuz is not just a passage for ships, it is an economic, military, and political leverage. When Tehran uses this route as a tool of pressure, the tool of pressure responds. The route is a control point. The blockade creates the strain that Iran tries hardest to hide. The disabled vessel becomes a symbol of this pressure. It was not an action to escalate wars without direction. It was a response to prevent a violation and to make it clear that American order at sea will be enforced as long as there is no real agreement. The other serious event came soon after. With the crash of a United States Army Apache helicopter near the coast of Oman, in the waters close to the Strait of Hormuz, 2 crew members were on board. They were safely rescued in about 2 hours and were in stable condition. The cause of the incident is still under investigation. So far, American authorities are handling the case carefully because it is still unclear whether there was a mechanical problem, enemy fire, or another cause. Trump stated that the pilots were fine and that no one was injured. This took away the strength of possible Iranian propaganda because the crash could have been exploited as a sign of American vulnerability. But the quick rescue showed the opposite. Even under regional tension, the United States managed to locate the crew, pull the soldiers out of the water, and prevent the incident from turning into a human and political tragedy. This detail matters because the Iranian regime tries to build fear around every accident, every attack, and every threat. The American response was simple. Protect the crew, maintain the investigation, and keep up the pressure. The Apache went down, but the military line did not fall. The crew was saved and the blockade continued. Trump also keeps the diplomatic front open. Upon returning from a sporting event, he said that negotiations with Iran are ongoing and that he might have a clearer idea about the deal in a day or 2. He advocated for a signed and strong document, saying that this would be better than a new round of bombings because an escalation would kill a lot of people. The logic is straightforward. Trump wants to force Tehran to accept verifiable terms without letting the regime believe that the United States has taken force off the table. J.D. Vance reinforced this point by saying that the success of any agreement doesn't depend only on what the Iranians put on paper, but on meeting the requirements. That's the key right now. The American government doesn't just want a signature for the photo. It wants proof, the opening of Hormuz, limits on the nuclear threat, and a reduction in pressure from Iran's allied groups. For Vance, if the agreement comes with real verification, it will be a great victory for the American people. The problem is that Iran is trying to play on two tables. On one hand, they talk about negotiation. On the other, Iranian authorities say there isn't enough goodwill from the United States and insist on the release of blocked assets. There is also resistance to directly addressing uranium enrichment and nuclear issues. This increases doubts about who is really in charge in Tehran. The foreign minister says one thing, members of the political system say another, and in the end, the decision goes through the hardcore of the regime. That's where Trump closes the circle. The negotiation is not just between Washington and Tehran. Gulf nations like Saudi Arabia and Qatar are part of the equation because they are on the front line of the Iranian threat. Iran still has drones, medium-range missiles, and the ability to put pressure on maritime routes. The pressure on Israel is also part of this equation. Trump spoke with Benjamin Netanyahu after the exchange of attacks between Israel and Iran and asked Israel to hold off on a larger retaliation so as not to ruin the chance for an agreement. Netanyahu agreed to hold back on a direct front against Iran at that moment, but made it clear that Israel will not accept attacks from Hezbollah coming from Lebanon. This difference is important. Trump is trying to prevent a larger war with Iran, while Israel continues to attack Hezbollah whenever it sees threats coming from Lebanese territory. In Lebanon, the situation remains tense. Israel launched new attacks against Tyre in southern Lebanon after evacuation orders. The Israeli government accuses Hezbollah, an ally of Iran, of using civilian areas to hide and operate. The war on the border hasn't stopped, even after attempts at a ceasefire. For Trump, this front is dangerous because Iran can use Hezbollah to provoke Israel and then play the victim during negotiations. Netanyahu reacted forcefully because Hezbollah tried to impose a new rule, attacking Israel from Lebanon and expecting Israel not to respond. The Israeli Prime Minister said this will not be accepted. The message is tough but simple. If Hezbollah opens fire, Israel will strike back. And at this point, Iran loses its narrative shield because its regional ally helps keep the crisis alive precisely at the moment when Tehran is trying to appear reasonable to extract concessions. Internal pressure in Iran is also growing. There are reports of limited protests related to educational policy and fear among civilians because of the regime's repression. Even when the protests aren't large, they show that the blockade and the external crisis are affecting the domestic situation. The regime depends on the image of strength. There is also a battle of narratives. Iran tries to say that it doesn't trust the United States and that it needs the release of assets to move forward. Washington responds that this release won't come before concrete steps. The regime wants money first. Trump wants behavior first. This difference explains why the agreement hasn't happened yet, even with signs of progress. The Apache crash raises tension but doesn't alter the crisis's core. The investigation will reveal if it was a failure, attack, or something else. Meanwhile, the crew rescue has already become part of the American response. The message is that the United States can operate in a risky environment, recover its service members, and maintain the mission. For the American public, this matters. No one wants an endless war. But no one wants to see Tehran controlling Hormuz through blackmail either. Trump is trying to impose a choice on the Iranian regime. The disabling of the oil tanker in the Gulf of Oman showed that the order is not symbolic. The rescue of the Apache crew showed that the United States continues to operate under risk. And the pressure on Netanyahu showed that Trump wants to control the escalation without handing the region over to the Iranian game. This is the deadlock where the crisis stands now. Trump holds the pen for the agreement, but he also keeps his hand on the pressure that made Tehran return to the table. I'm Milson Alves, an international affairs specialist, and my purpose is to keep you well informed with the truth every day. The news links are in the video description. Leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and at the end, check out the comments so you can be even more engaged with the Milson Alves community.